Mana Moon is becoming a very popular item on AD carries. In this video, I'll explain why AD carries are building it, which champions are best with it, and how you should adjust your games to make it work best. Mana Moon has always been a very uncommon item, only being built consistently on Ezreal and occasionally Jace. The AP version, Archangel Staff, is much more common, as there are many more AP champions that need to spam high mana cost abilities, and also enjoy having the shield for safety. However, recently pro players have been testing out Mana Moon builds on many more AD carries than usual, and it's starting to creep into solo queue. The reason for this is the efficiency of the item. Mana Moon is the most gold efficient AD item in the game, while also being a cheap item, which lets you get it very early. Another reason Mana Moon is seeing popularity is its combination with the Presence of Mind rune for crazy synergy. This rune refunds your mana when you get a kill, and also increases your maximum mana by 100 each time. This bonus mana then increases your damage when you have a Mana Moon, with its unique passive called Awe, which grants bonus attack damage equal to 2% maximum mana. So the more kills you get with the Presence of Mind rune, the more damage you'll do using the Mana Moon passive. This rune is in the Precision tree, a tree which all AD carries already take, so it's not a difficult change to make for the free damage it gives. Furthermore, Mana Moon is such a good item for AD carries as they only want to build attack damage, not armor, not HP, and not magic resist. Comparing this to an AD top laner, they want the tanky stats, as well as attack damage and cooldown reduction. So it's not as useful for them as AD carries are only looking for this one stat. The best Mana Moon champions right now are Ezreal, as always, Lucian, Senna, Kai'Sa, Twitch, and Miss Fortune. These are all champions that pro players such as Fnatic Reckless and SKT Teddy have been spamming in solo queue to test, so consider giving them a try yourself. Mana Moon is very efficient on all of these champions, and they're able to stack it well with their abilities. Coming into mid-game, they'll be much stronger than usual. The Mana Moon build on these champs is a trade-off. You lose damage early, before the item is fully stacked, as a sacrifice for a super high mid-game power peak, which continues till the end of the game. This build does mean you'll struggle to have a huge impact on early fights, such as that dragon, especially on Miss Fortune, who could otherwise build lethality and have a strong early game, and Kai'Sa, who could buy flat AD and get her abilities evolved early. For this trade-off, you must do this build in situations where you do not need to win the early game. A good example of this would be if your team has scaling champions in other lanes like Kassadin, Hecarim, or Jax. This would mean that you have a lot of time to stack your tier and group up with your team after it's stacked to dominate mid-game fights with your efficient items when your teammates have their items as well. This build can also be good in lanes that are impossible to win 2v2, so you're forced to stay back and farm, for example playing against a Sivir who's just going to push the wave constantly. However, this build is not so good against a strong early game team like Caitlyn, AD carry, Lux support, and Elise jungle, as you may be too weak to contest them taking your tower, which will then lead to them roaming to other lanes and getting a gold lead. In situations like this, it may be better to do the normal crit build or on-hit build, so that you can survive the lane and still be relevant early game, just to contest the enemy AD carries so they're not dominating the game before you can even do any damage. Personally, I think that this strategy is slightly stronger in organised team play, like pro leagues, as it lets them build a composition around it and play the game in a way so they can protect their bot lane while it's stacking the tier, so that then they'll get to mid-game completely even. They might have lost a couple of dragons, but gold-wise they'll be fine, and they'll then be able to use the efficiency of the item to gain an advantage in the mid-game. In pro games, it's very unlikely that the game's going to be over by the time a tier has been stacked, whereas sometimes in solo queue, the game can even end before you complete your Mana Moon stacks. But it does have a place in solo queue, especially for AD carries who want to be the late-game insurance for their team, or maybe starved of farm. So for example, if you're playing against an aggressive lane, and you do lose your tower early, and you're forced to farm in risky situations, this can give an easy jump to a full item just by stacking your Mana Moon, without having to get any gold at the same time. You will not stomp lanes with this build, but you will be stronger than the enemy AD carry by mid-game, as long as they haven't got lots of kills, which is often when the AD carries become relevant anyway. If you can make it through the early game at even gold, Mana Moon is the strongest item a mana-using AD carry can buy. Ezreal is the perfect example of why Mana Moon is good on AD carries, especially ones who use mana. Ezreal's not a very good early game champion, as he needs items for his abilities to start doing real damage. His base damage is not that great, as with many AD carries, but once he's got his Triforce, Mana Moon stacked, and a Blade of the Roaring King, he's pretty much the strongest in the game at that point. Mana Moon is so good on him, as he has 4 different abilities that cost mana, He's using them, especially his Q, constantly. He's trying to spam his abilities as much as he can, and thus he gets his Mana Moon very quickly. Lucian is a champion who also has very high mana costs, which often leads to people building Essence Reaver on him. However, Mana Moon can be a good alternative to that, as Essence Reaver doesn't give you that much mana, especially early game, whereas if you're starting with a tier, you're never going to run out of mana by the time you've stacked it a little bit in lane, and that means that you will lose a little bit of early damage, but you'll trade off for a much stronger mid-game, where Lucian can normally fall off a bit due to his range. You'll then be peaking in power. Mana Moon is not the strongest item when it's the only item that you have, even if it's stacked already. You need these other items to back it up, such as on Lucian, you could still get a blade and an Infinity Edge to go along with it, and by that point you will be very strong. Mana Moon really just avoids the times where Lucian has no mana and he's not able to contribute to a fight, because if he can't use his E to dash in or out of the fight, he's not going to be able to DPS, and he'll just have to stand far away, out of range, to make sure that he's not dying. Senna is a champion with even higher cost abilities, who has quite long cooldowns on them as well. So she really does need to have lots of mana so that she can be able to use her abilities whenever she needs to. Senna is a very passive laner anyway. She's not likely to get 2v2 kills, so she's quite happy to just farm up and get her souls, which is why she's often even played as support, as she's so useless early game. She can get the souls and they're worth the gold that you would get farming as an AD carry, and she becomes useful that way. This stacking of souls is quite similar to the stacking of the tier, in that you're happy to not fight for a while, just stay using your abilities, picking up the souls from the minions, farming your tier, so that then later in the game you can be dealing tons of damage to their carries while also keeping your carries alive. Twitch is an interesting AD carry to see being even played by pro players, as he's often not played by anyone except solo queue junglers. He hasn't been played in pro play by many AD carries. I think that Reckless is probably one of the most recent players to have played him in pro play a couple of worlds ago, so it makes sense that he's one of the people testing him in solo queue to see if it's good or not. Twitch has some high mana cost abilities, and he often spams his QW and E pretty much as often as he can if he's in lane, just so that he can get the extra damage down, because he's not a very safe laner, so he can't just be auto-attacking for trades. He has to use all of his abilities to kind of survive in the lane, so that he's got the zone control, especially with his W, and getting the surprise with his Q is often a play that you can make in lane. You could even build this on jungle Twitch, as it could give you a mid-game power spike that otherwise you may be falling off at that point. Twitch is someone who struggles to farm safely mid-game by himself, so Mana Moon can help with that, as you won't need the farm as badly. This is an interesting build. I think it's worth trying in solo queue, especially if you're tired of relying on your supports to win 2v2s in lane. You can do this build, play passive during the lane, even let your support roam, and not lose anything as you're just sitting there stacking your tier. You don't want to be taking the fights early anyway, so this can be a good way to get you through the lane and make you just as strong as anyone else on the map by mid-game. Leave a comment to let me know if there are any other strategies you'd like me to talk about. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.